Hmm. Namaskar. A very good evening to all of you. On behalf of the Vivekanand Study Circle, Jawaharlal Nehru University, we welcome our speakers, delegates, and dear friends to this virtual meeting for the book discussion on the science of happiness. We start today's program with the recital of Vedic chanting from Taittiriya Upanishad, a part of the Yajurveda. So, for this, I request Professor Anirban Chakravarti and Mrs. Anindita Mukherjee to recite the mantra and begin the program. Anirban sir and Anindita ma'am, please.
सहनावतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै शांति शांति शांति
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for such a nice recital. Now, I would request Dr. Arpita Mitra to introduce the speakers and the topic and share this session. Arpita, Didi, please.
A very warm namaskar to everyone. I hope I'm audible, Alka.
Yes, Didi, yes.
Yeah. Welcome to this book discussion today. We are going to discuss the recent book, Science of Happiness, authored by Pravrajika Divyananda Pranaji. While all of us want to be happy, we may not be aware of the science and art of happiness. It is only natural that all of us will seek happiness because all of us have come from the same source of eternal bliss, which is Brahman. Swami Vivekananda had said, our real nature is all bliss, and all the pleasure we know is but a reflection, an atom of that bliss we get from touching our real nature. We are fortunate to have the author of the book, Divyananda Pranaji, with us today. The author has done a great service by putting together all the insights on happiness from our precious Yoga and Vedanta scriptures. What is true happiness? What is the source of happiness? How to attain lasting happiness in a world that is a mixture of good and evil? We look forward to a session that will answer these and many more questions. With this note, I extend a warm welcome to our three panelists today, Pravrajika Divyananda Pranaji, Gitanjali Murariji, and Dr. Prachi Singh. Mataji needs no introduction. She is a very well-known speaker. She is a monastic member of Sri Sharada Math and the editor of their English journal Samvit. She was the principal of Nivedita Vidya Mandir from 2014 to 2019. She specializes in Yoga and Vedanta, and she has traveled all over India and all over the world to give lectures on these subjects. Gitanjali lives in Mumbai and has over 20 years of experience in the television industry. As programming head, she launched the channel Sony Pix as well as created several entertaining shows. A few years back, she turned to writing full-time. She started to write a story for adult readers that eventually developed into a fantasy adventure with the message of Vedanta forming its core. This was recently published by Penguin India, The Crown of Seven Stars. It is her debut novel. Dr. Prachi Singh is currently assistant professor in the Department of Environmental Sciences at Shahid Rajguru College of Applied Sciences for Women. She has completed her master's and PhD from the School of Environmental Sciences in Jawaharlal Nehru University. With this, I now request Mataji to take over. We'll take up the question and answer after all the three panelists have finished speaking. Right? In the meantime, if you want, you can type your questions in the chat box. One request to everybody, except for the speaker, everybody else, please turn off your mic and if possible, also your camera. Thank you.
Please wait. Deliberately it has been placed. Okay, namaste, and welcome to this session on science of happiness. So when Prachi actually told me that you are going to have a discussion on science of happiness, I was quite surprised because why suddenly this book? And then she told me that it's a new release and the title is Science of Happiness. Happiness is something everybody wants to know. So I'm really happy that you have taken up discussion on this. Why is it important to go into the science of happiness? This question is first to be answered before we proceed. For the simple reason, if we do not know enough about happiness, we will be searching for it in the wrong place. Isn't this pretty obvious? Just check your own life and see. If we are not sure about what happiness means, where it lies, what are the degrees of happiness available to us, what are the different levels of happiness available, what are the types of happiness, the ladder of happiness that is given to the human experience. If we are not sure of some of these facts, which are existential facts, they are facts about human existence. If we do not know this, we will be searching and chasing happiness in the wrong places. And we will have this tendency to fall for immediate experience of joy rather than any long-term, sustained, fulfilling happiness. So it is important to know certain facts about happiness. And when I was a student, I was given to a lot of meditation, and then during those meditative moments, I used to feel that happiness is indeed a state of mind. And if we can get into subtler and subtler modes of mind, it unfolds a whole lot of greater happiness for us. But this realm remains unexplored because the mind is not trained in meditation. It doesn't habitually feel that deep calmness, that deep sense of touching its foundation, its source. It is not used to all this because this is not part of our educational apparatus even. So due to all these reasons, I used to feel that a whole lot of ideas on happiness can be drawn right from our scriptures through the power of meditation. And anybody who will do it will know it. It is not a matter of, see, even when you read this book, or suppose you take up the Science of Happiness, it is not a book to be just read like that. It is, at every page you have to find out, is this true? Apply it and see in your own life. And then if it rings true, then you can accept it. Because it's a complete science which has been studied here. It is no theory, it is no philosophy, it is not even something meant to be believed in or taken on faith, nothing of that sort. The actual laws of happiness and the laws by which the human mind functions, and also the technology of happiness, how to generate high level of happiness, more and more fulfilling experience in our lives, that is what is being discussed in this book. So when in 2018, the Indian Institute of Technology here in New Delhi, they requested me to speak there, give a course on the science of happiness. They asked me what should we what term should we give the course, and what should we call it. So I told them that if you want the study of happiness, then you make it science of happiness, and according to Yoga and Vedanta. So then the course was launched, and it was very well accepted. It became quite popular. That is why this book also came out, because a whole lot of people who saw the videos of that course, they wrote to our headquarters and asked the General Secretary Mataji to print this in book form, print those lectures and publish it so that it remains with whoever wants to go through these ideas. So then I got the order straight from there that I should publish these lectures. Then we got to making this book, and I had very wonderful help through so many devotees here, and I have quoted their names in the book. So they transcribed the lectures, then we proofread it, and along with all my other activities, I had to edit this and then made pictures out of the slides and saw how best the ideas could be conveyed. So all this happened over a period of almost 4 or 5 months. And this Guru Purnima in July 2020, this book was released. Now this book is selling very well, and it is also selling well outside India for the simple reason, who does not want to know about happiness? What does this book cover? What is extra in this book? Now if you type Science of Happiness in Google, you will get a whole lot of ideas, and you will also find a few books with this title. But this is Science of Happiness according to Yoga Vedanta, which means when you dive deep within yourself, what do you understand about happiness? This is a coverage of that, mainly that. And also there is one chapter on everyday paths to joy, which means how to keep the mind pleasant and positive on an everyday basis, even if you don't dive into yoga. How can you keep the mind balanced and positive? So there is also a charcha, a kind of coverage on that. But essentially, it is drawing from a lot from our Yoga Sutras and Vedanta on happiness. And it is to be understood through meditation. There are meditative insights which have been put here in scientific language. Or for the simple reason that, see, we all, many of us are science students and we want definite knowledge. We want it in the form of laws. So all that research has been done, and because it was presented in IIT, all the more so this had to be done. Now, regarding happiness, let me just tell you some things about which this book covers. See, there is a ladder of happiness given in the human experience. This goes unacknowledged by most people because they have never seriously studied happiness in their lives. They are too busy. The mind wants to remain busy with this and that for the simple reason it is not trained to be calm and quiet. And so in that busyness, whatever little joy or pleasure they can find, they just race and chase that. So a proper understanding of happiness requires a proper understanding of mind, because happiness is a state of your mind and beyond that also. That is, even if you store mind, there is a higher level of happiness available if you do it perfectly consciously. This is the state of yoga actually. So the thing is, if you want to capture higher and more sustainable, more, you can say fervent and intense levels of happiness, some amount of training to the mind is to be given. Otherwise, the mind will remain busy with its restless ways, with its distractions, with its conditioning, which can be quite negative. Many people, especially during this pandemic, you can see, they are deeply into depression and anger and anxiety and stress and all these troubles for the simple reason the mind is not used to remaining quiet and positive. It has not got used to sattvic states. So this is a huge loss on the happiness front, if the mind remains like that. So just knowing these simple things will put our mind into order. It will awaken us to the fact that the human experience is meant to climb the ladder of happiness and to get the highest possible happiness available to us in this human experience. So what is this ladder of happiness? At the first rung of this ladder is sensory happiness, which we get through the senses. But that's only the first rung according to yoga. Look at our entire daily life. It's all to do with only just this rung of the ladder. And we sort of believe that if we add more objects to our experience, this happiness will maximize, will increase. But it's not so. See your own life. You don't have to believe anything that I say. Please check it with your own life. The more you add objects to your experience on the first rung of the ladder, you will become more comfortable. You will become more secure, not necessarily more joyous, not necessarily happier. And the tendency of this level of happiness, mere sensory happiness, is it puts you on the what is called hedonic treadmill, which means you keep chasing pleasure, and it's like a treadmill. You know, it doesn't stop, but it keeps you at the same place. So you are constantly chasing. Once you get the object of your attachment, of your pleasure, you experience it. I used to give the example of Dilli ka laddu in IIT. So you ate 2 Dilli ka laddus or maybe 3. After that, you can't eat it anymore. And what does the mind do after it has tasted the maximum limit of this happiness? It will immediately jump to the next object, which it holds to be pleasurable. It doesn't saturate there, it doesn't soak into that experience, it doesn't get absorbed. It immediately jumps to the another object of experience. So which means this hedonic treadmill experience is ever putting your mind into more and more restless, outgoing modes. This is the nature of happiness at the first rung of the ladder. That it will make you seek only one thing, but once you get that thing, not that it gives you ultimate fulfillment, it will make you race towards the next object now. So the treadmill goes on. You are in the same place, you don't move anywhere, and you remain unfulfilled. Yet addicted maybe to that object, frustrated when you are not able to get it, angry when you are not able to get it, with all these modes. So this is the nature of the first rung of the ladder of happiness. But the good news is this is not all. If you want to increase your happiness, you must climb to the second rung of the ladder and not try to maximize objects on the first rung. This is what the science of happiness will teach you. That it is not just about bringing fine objects into our life, it is stepping to the next rung of the ladder. Not that you should not enjoy the objects of the world, but you must know their place in your life. Definitely go ahead and enjoy them, but you must know that this is not all. Higher than sensory happiness is the happiness born of thought, deep thinking, deep level engagement, which gives meaning to your life, which gives purpose to your life. That is far more fulfilling than just eating 2-3 ice creams, isn't it? Deep level engagement with mathematics, a really positive, useful conversation with somebody on some subject, that will give you greater joy. Why? This is happiness born of thought. This is the second rung of the ladder. Engagement produces a higher degree of happiness. Even a simple game of chess, if you are deeply engaged, at the end of the game, you will feel a sort of gladness in your mind, naturally, because there was deep level engagement. So this is the second rung of the ladder, which is to be climbed consciously. Intellectuals do it. And this is the understanding we must get, that the level of happiness can be increased by climbing this ladder. The third level of happiness is by purifying and elevating our emotions. See, the joy born of service, of making somebody happy. You haven't even met the beggar on the road, but the very sight of him or her, it just melts your heart, and you go out of the way and do something for that person. You know, for the next 1 week, your mind will be glad, spontaneously. A natural sense of peace comes into the heart. So this is the joy of service, doing something for someone without any expectation. And the joy of elevated emotion, like bhakti, devotion. These are all joys to be felt, to be known. Only when you feel it, then you understand that simply wasting my emotions on something which is useless, something which is just sensual, is baseless, it's meaningless in life. So emotional happiness is to be elevated to a certain level. And then you understand that this is a higher rung of this ladder of happiness. The joy born of sheer devotion to God, prayer, puja, good relationships, respectful relationships. This is far higher than anything that the senses can give you. Isn't it? This is the experience of all of us. Only those same moments of our meditation, of our indrawn roots, that has to be analyzed and studied, and we must be able to generate these convictions that happiness indeed is a ladder which is to be climbed rung by rung to maximize our levels of happiness. So beyond this happiness is again the happiness of born of meditation that I have given as the fourth rung of the ladder. Deep meditation on a holy object or on the impersonal, deep level inquiry. This itself will open vistas of higher awareness for you. And happiness, ultimately, it is an exponential function of your awareness. If that awareness is very clear, coming out like a beam of light, your mind will remain clear, fresh, happy all the time. And if thought is blocking this stream, and all kinds of erratic thought, negative emotions, worries, anxieties, then the awareness is completely blocked. You are only aware of the troubles in your mind, and happiness diminishes naturally. So meditation clears all of this. And that is why the fourth rung of the ladder is indeed the meditative experience, the happiness born of that. In fact, once you get into the state of yoga, higher meditation, you will see it is the sanest state of existence. For the simple reason, the mind, how it functions in that state, everything about it will keep giving you happiness, inner bliss and peace, what our saints and sages have always told us. But we are not used to this, that creates all the trouble. So naturally this book arrives at the conclusion that a little bit of the technology, the techniques of yoga are to be practiced to unfold higher levels of happiness. Otherwise, you will remain just in your confused that mental atmosphere which you have conditioned into yourself right from childhood. And we have a huge past. So all of those sanskars alone will work without this clearing up process. So clarifying the mind through meditation and awakening ourselves to higher levels of awareness is an essential part of the study of the science of happiness. Because then only you know what is the reach of consciousness and happiness available to us. Many people don't even go till that fourth rung of the ladder. So that is why this book is systematically penetrating into all of this entire ladder of happiness. And beyond this, as you know, positive psychology by Martin Seligman has given us some equations on happiness. Happiness, he would say, is P plus E plus M. That is pleasure plus engagement plus meaning. Then later he modified it into another something called PERMA, where P is PERMA, P-E-R-M-A, where P is not just pleasure, it is positive emotion. E is engagement, R is good relationships, positive relationships, M is meaning, and A is achievement. So all these views are also covered in this book. And what does Yoga Vedanta further add to this? These may all be the factors to give you happiness at the first and second rung of the ladder, definitely. But there is something beyond this. There is something beyond this which can be discovered through meditation. And then we have proceeded into a scientific understanding of the practice of meditation with the background of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras and also a lot of insights from Vedanta, from the Kathopanishad, Kenopanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad. From all these Upanishads, a lot of insights on happiness. And what is the state of mind which will flood the mind, which will flood your being with happiness? What is the state of mind which you can manufacture at any given point of time to experience this? All this has been exhaustively covered in this book. Then, of course, everyday paths to joy also have been covered, which means that there are certain strange tendencies of the mind which don't allow happiness. So these are to be overcome through practice. Like, for example, the tendency to worry. Many of us have this. The tendency to have fears which are irrational and unexplainable. The tendency not to be grateful. These are all things which remove happiness. The tendency to find fault. So all these things will remove happiness from the mind. You can see people who indulge in this remain in a perpetual state of depression and they cause a lot of negativity around themselves. they sort of radiate that feeling. So the thing is, these tendencies of the mind are to be overcome again through practice, through good habits. So everyday paths to joy will cover that. There's something called savoring, which will be of interest to you. It means appreciating something with gratitude. If you make this one thing a habit, all of these tendencies will go. Appreciate the beauty, the joy of your life, and with gratitude. The little things that come into your life, the fact that you are so well placed, the fact that you are open to knowledge, the fact that you have such wonderful friends, a beautiful family. Do we thank God on a daily basis for having brought all this into our lives? We don't do it. We take it for granted. But it should not be so. If you are grateful habitually and on an everyday basis, you will be always happy. Appreciation with gratitude is to be practiced. So like this, simple techniques of everyday living, which will keep our minds positive, have been covered in this book. Then also are covered the neuroscience of unhappiness, which will be of interest, especially, after I gave this course, 2-3 boys wrote to me saying that, Mother, you have cured us of addiction. We were addicted to substance abuse and all this. And because we didn't know where happiness lies and how to get it, but this course cleared all of these concepts for us. Then we practiced. I gave them meditations also to practice. In fact, the 5-minute meditation which I give in IIT is on YouTube. So any of you who are interested in all this, it's called guided meditation. 5-minute meditation for IITs. So it's for everybody, but it was given there, so it's named like that. So they practiced all that and they came out of their addictions. And then they wrote to me, Mataji, these techniques really work. So exhaustively, I have discussed the neuroscience of unhappiness, of addictions, of the core causes for our grief, negative states of mind. This has been discussed in this book for the simple reason, just knowing will get you out of those states. Just knowing how to remain positive. Understanding the nature of happiness at the sensory level, at the intellectual level, at higher levels. This itself will commit you to higher levels of happiness. Because you see, all that you are exposed to day in and day out is what the media has to offer to you. And the media will naturally have a huge commercial bias. So only those things are getting bombarded on your senses, which are meant to be sold. So the thing is, you must be able to discriminate out and find your way to higher levels of understanding, happiness, and experience available to the human experience. And not just only with that much data which is getting bombarded on your senses. So books like these will help you achieve that. Don't remain just on the level of the senses. What I see, what I hear, that is not all of the data that I have to think in my mind. My mind itself can generate original knowledge from within if I learn to practice meditation, if I learn to dive within myself and discover the higher levels of happiness available to me. And then after this neuroscience of addictions, there's one chapter, whole chapter on the source of happiness. So is happiness a state of mind? Is it something which is beyond mind? Because higher meditations, they talk of emptying mind, transcending mind. So what exactly is the nature of the highest happiness? What is the nature of samadhi? What is the nature of pure consciousness that is spoken of in Vedanta? All this also has been exhaustively discussed. And then the techniques which will get you there. There are definite yogic techniques, techniques of meditation, techniques of pranayama. All this have been discussed in the course of this book. And so here I'm just giving you a gist of what this book contains. When Dr. T.G.K. Murthy, who was the former director of ISRO, when he heard these talks, it was he who wrote to our General Secretary saying that please publish these for the simple reason that this would be very useful for generations of students and young people, because they don't know where happiness is to be found. That is why all the problem. And how it is possible for them to climb the ladder of happiness. That is the whole problem with our society. All that you see in terms of, you can say, wrong behavior, crime, all that you see, it is only this that we have displaced joy into something we don't know what. And the prevailing confusion with regard to happiness is responsible for our youth force going into all sorts of addictions. Many times today, mobile phone addiction also is a huge thing which has to be addressed. So for all these, understanding the basic laws of happiness and directly from what the scriptures have to offer you, from Yoga and Vedantic scriptures, and through the process of meditation. This book is a product of meditation, let me tell you this. It is not a product of thinking merely. So with this, I would like to conclude saying that for students, young people, professionals, of course anybody who is seeking happiness, this book I'm sure will be able to give you a whole lot of good insights on where happiness is to be found. You have to read it to know it. With this, let me conclude. This is in the essential content of this book. So thank you very much for having me here. And I think we'll give it to the next speaker now.
Thank you, Mataji. I now request Gitanjali Di to take over the mic.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity, for me to share my thoughts on this absolutely remarkable book by Divyananda Pranaji. I'll begin with the title, Science of Happiness, which by itself is very catchy. When I first came across this book, for a moment I thought the words science and happiness together are quite an oxymoron. Happiness is so subjective, it's intangible, an emotion, and science is, as we know, the study of facts that can be seen, tabulated, quantified in an objective manner. So I was completely mystified. And at the same time, I remember thinking that if indeed there is a science to happiness, then this book can open the door to perhaps a more long-lasting state of happiness, accessible to everyone. After all, we are constantly, as Divyananda Pranaji was just explaining, we are constantly in search of joy, whether it's through titillating our senses, finding meaningful relationships, intellectual pursuits, or the pursuit of wealth, accomplishments that make us more respected in our social circles. Everything we do is to satisfy an inner craving for happiness. And in my life experience, I had already discovered that these types of joys never last. On achieving one such happiness, I would find myself in a state of calm, confident joy, but for a certain period of time only. And after which I would once again become restless. So I had every excuse to plunge headlong into this book. Now, this book has left several deep impressions. Firstly, I realized this subject is about me. That is not me as a personality, but that it's all about a subjective experience that takes place in the mind. Basically, it helps us to understand our own mind. We all know man is a thinking being, yet we go through life without having any understanding, or maybe a little understanding of the thinking process. Come to think of it, we should be taught about this thought process and the mind that enables this thought process early in life, so that we can use our mind and its power like a cutting edge tool. On reading this book, I have become convinced that we'll be truly empowered only once we have understood the absolute functioning of our own individual mind. Otherwise, we are simply, hurtling through life like a car without brakes. I was struck by another fact, that yoga psychology studied the human mind and its condition thousands of years ago. And based on their experiments on themselves, these rishis or sages discovered the truth, which forms the basis of consciousness studies. It's a remarkable fact that the study of the human mind in such depth had occurred during an ancient, unknown time. And that too, by turning the mind inward, that is through rigorous introspection, meditation. These ancient psychologists revealed what is absolutely verifiable in today's time. They analyzed our everyday experiences, just as Divyananda Pranaji was explaining. And that is why I was able to relate it directly to my own experience. Now, since I'm already familiar with Vedanta philosophy, it wasn't difficult for me to follow the book's foundational principle of consciousness as our true identity versus mind-body complex. And as Divyananda Pranaji has just explained, this is critical to happiness. However, despite having an understanding of Vedanta, this book has helped drive the point home of one's true identity, my own true identity, in the most lucid and rational manner. For example, somewhere in the book it says, the fact we are experiencing things means consciousness is at the heart of our personality paradigm. That is why we have conscious experiences. This is so simple to understand. I mean, there is no maybe, could be about it. So for me now, the practice of remaining in awareness, that is separating myself from the mind-body complex, has now become a daily practice and not an occasional one as it was earlier. In understanding awareness, as explained by Divyananda Pranaji in the book, I'm also beginning to understand what causes, the modifications in the mind, how are impressions formed, which go from the conscious to the subconscious and then to the unconscious mind, and how these impressions create grooves or neural pathways in the brain that enable habitual thinking, and how these pathways can be changed. What is, even the West, the scientists there are calling rewiring the brain. So since we can change the way we think, which we all have ample experience of throughout our life, it obviously points to the fact that one, we are not the mind, and two, we are not at the mercy of the different states of mind. So whenever there are moments when I feel a bit of helplessness in a certain situation, I just reflect on this, and it is extremely empowering and liberating. Now in my daily life, I try to bring a high level of awareness to every task, whether it's imaginative or mundane. And whenever I'm able to do so, the outcome is far, far better. One would say this is very obvious. But you see, for me, at least, I know that my mind is mostly clouded with several thought streams. And that concentrating it on a task for me is a real effort, especially a task that I don't like, But after reading this book, I've understood that increasing awareness in the mind means to separate it from thoughts and emotions, which are constantly creating the grooves in the brain and which further leads to compulsive thinking. So now I'm at least able to bring that awareness of this pattern when it occurs in the mind. And the moment that awareness dawns and the separation from thoughts and emotions occur, I find the mind becoming concentrated. And as it says in the book, higher the level of awareness, more the happiness experience, and it's absolutely true. This practice of identifying with awareness has had another positive fallout. It is the decrease in identity, the decrease in identifying with upadhis, which, as is explained in the book, are superimpositions. There is a huge sense of freedom in the moments when I'm able to disconnect from these superimpositions, such as I'm so-and-so's daughter, I'm this writer, this is my standing in society, etc., etc. Another fact about the working of the mind that has resonated with me and is once again verifiable is Shreyas and Prayas. What is good for us versus what is pleasurable. This is an everyday choice that we have to make, isn't it? For example, for a long time, I'm just giving my personal example here. For a long time, I used to make a resolve every night to wake up very early the next day for meditation. And I would wake up, but my mind would offer me the temptation of sleeping in a little longer, and I would fall prey to it. This became a pattern, my resolving to wake up early and then breaking it, followed by remorse. But ever since I understood the concepts of Shreyas and prayers, I now just jump out of bed the minute I'm awake. And, I feel so energized through the day because of this conscious choice that I've made. And it has also increased my confidence. Lastly, what I really liked about this book was that it emphatically states that Yoga Vedanta insists that we must live our lives as completely as possible. That is, enjoy the world and all that it offers us. And living complete, wholesome lives is only possible when we have understood our mind and brought it in our control. So for a successful life in both material and spiritual sense, the study of the science of happiness, I would say, is absolutely essential. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gitanjali Di,
Thank
for your observations on the book. I now request Prachi to share her impressions about the book. And Gitanjali Di, please mute your mic.
I'm trying to, Arpita.
Okay.
If you can
No
mute
problem.
and also switch. I think
Okay, fine.
Anirban
Yeah,
can
it's
do
okay.
it.
Yes, Prachi, over to you.
Thank you, Didi. Namaste, everyone. I would like to thank everyone for providing me an opportunity to speak on the same. I was initially a bit hesitant if I was the right person, as I'm still in this stage of learning and experiments. And so I have tried putting the ideas in my perspective after going through the chapters of the book, through the readings, experiments, and the observations so far I had in my life. So when I was a 5-year-old child, I think it is very hard for me to recall a moment when I had to really think and worry about the fact, what is happiness? Because I was always happy, and those small things of having an ice cream, having a good dress, they were quite engaging for me, that even after celebrating these all things, I never had to think that what is happiness. As I grew up, I find that that after having my favorite eatery, even after engaging myself in my favorite hobbies and engagements, even after celebrating fun-filled moments with my friends and family, receiving a good education, there is still an unending yearn of captivating with the state, what we are right now calling it as happiness. They definitely gave me pleasure, and with these pleasures, I felt happy. But that was for a small moment. The happiness I was getting from these events, objects, engagements were short-lived. Once they got over, I started running and looking for them in the other forms. So one thing became clearer, that the pleasure was one form and component of happiness, but it wasn't happiness itself. And that's why we all have been happy at some of the other stage of life, but still we find something that is missing. Probably we wish to maintain it, we wish to make it stay longer, we wish to make it a constant state of feeling. And that is why when it comes to define happiness, it is very difficult to formulate any specific definition to it. After all, it is something to feel about. And because each one of us is feeling in our own personal way, so it becomes the personal experience. We may wish to describe or define it with words like pride, gratitude, contentment, satisfaction, positive emotions. On yet higher levels, we may say that it's something that adds meaningfulness to the life, or when I feel worthy of something, or worthy of like whatever job I am doing, I feel joy and glad about it, and that is probably the happiness. In terms of life, when the events in my life happened in more cheerful and excited way, that made me feel happy. But again, there was a question. When did I feel excited or exuberant about the things happening in my life? And mostly when they happened the way I wished them to happen. However, when they didn't happen the way I felt, the way I was expecting them, I felt sad about it. Does the percent scale of things happening in my life or in our ways, drove our scale of happiness here. So I realized that whatever I was doing, my actions like education, career, job, family, and everything is in pursuit of happiness. And in yet larger picture, every well-being done on this planet is also directly, indirectly affected by that need of becoming happy. We create comforts and convenience, again, probably to make ourselves happy. And our society has attained almost the finest of technologies that were not present in past. Yet we find, yet I found that the lives of our grandparents and parents were much simpler and satisfied than ours. It is true that, of course, we are in the most comfortable and convenient eras, but if the comfort and convenience were the happiness, then again the question came to my mind, then we should have been the happiest and the most joyful generation of today. We may feel happy getting or buying new things too, but we find happiness for a small moment and we start looking for the next one. This implies that comfort, convenience, and advancement in technologies were also the components of happiness, but they were also not the happiness itself. Thus, it was clear that the seat of perception of this feeling of happiness and gladness didn't lie outside in any article, objects, or incidents. Rather, it was somewhere inside, and it was in our minds, which is actually the seat of perception. And depending upon how our mind is perceiving it, we all feel happy in variable degrees. So I observed and found that a rickshaw puller who felt so joyous and happy in having even a simple dal roti after his hard day's work, and he was very happy after laying down on a couch that was made of jute, while a millionaire felt dissatisfied and unhappy about a day because he felt making a deal with the company because he had even though he had a sumptuous amount of food and fine bed to sleep. Our sages and sages have found this secret for the secret for the everlasting happiness. And that made me think and understand this fact that outside things will never happen 100% the way we want it. Life has its own way dealing with things. True, we try and give our best, yet we have to understand that our instrument of perceiving happiness is within us, that is inside the mind, that is in the mind. And there comes the idea of cultivating the mind by learning the art of managing it, and by stabilizing it, we can understand the true meaning of happiness. Moreover, happiness in its most brilliant and highest form. This is the strength of Vedanta and Yoga Sutra and the Upanishads, that the feeling of joy prevails in mind. Hence, our way of living focuses on managing and understanding this instrument, that is the mind. This is what made me realize the significance why my grandparents and parents used to practice their discipline, routine life, a balance in life. And even after having the less number of facilities, they were very content, they were satisfied, and they were happy. All the exercises and experiment on the physical, mental, intellectual, and spiritual platforms were thus performed so that they can train their minds. And that's why they used to tell us these ideals to harness love, care, kindness, and well-being. And the result is a peaceful, settled, and a clear mind that is automatically filled and refilled with this continuous state of joy. As it became clearer and clearer, I realized that the source of eternal and highest form of joy lies in the realization of this true nature of our spirits. So after going through this book of Science of Happiness, I now realize that happiness is not something to be achieved because it is already there inside us. The thing that we have to learn is to harness it and to practice this art of harnessing it from within. It will actually enable us to understand the meaning of happiness. I have gone through the first 2 chapters, and it is written in a very simple and easy to understand English. And hence, I would say that it is perfect for each age group, from youth to students to researchers and to adults in understanding it. It describes what is mind and the different levels. We often hear words like samskars, vrittis, chit, etc., which are spoken by our family and by parents also. So the book tells us about what are samskars, vrittis, and the chain of reactions and the source of content for them. The chapters have also described the concept in the most scientific and logical ways, And I really enjoyed reading the analogies that have been taken from the scriptures. For example, Tribunavali and the stories from Nachiketa. They have been extended to our daily life examples, and through that, I was able to understand what and how this, or where is the source of happiness present. So it has covered various dimensions of science, physics, metaphysics, psychology, and philosophies. And it has also discussed the forms of various levels of happiness. For example, happiness, there is one form of happiness which is derived from the well-being of others. There is one happiness which is only centered on one's own personal needs. And yet there is a kind of happiness which is derived from the sadness of others, depending upon the three gunas. So it has described the subtle differences between pleasure, happiness, and joy, and has given an insight into the highest form of happiness. And then it also tells about that the meditation is that meditation is the practice with which we can attain this thing of practicing and bringing our mind to the calmer level. And automatically it will start becoming clearer that what is actually the meaning of happiness and where it lies. So at the end, I would like to conclude by quoting a very beautiful saying by Swamiji from the Complete Works, that is from volume 7. In men, we find a higher plane of happiness, that of thought. And in the Jnani, there is the highest plane of happiness in the self, the Atman. So to the philosopher, this knowledge of the self is of the highest utility because it gives him the highest happiness possible. Sense gratifications or physical things cannot be of the highest utility to him because he does not find in them the same pleasure that he finds in knowledge itself. And after all, knowledge is the one goal and is really the highest happiness there. Thank you.
Thank you, Prachi. I thank all the three panelists for their important interventions. I now open the question and answer. Mataji, we already have a question from someone. Is this book available as a Kindle edition, in Kindle edition? Mataji, your mic needs to be unmuted.
It's available on Amazon.in, but it's not available in Kindle edition as yet.
The person, Sunil Dhar, has a question for you. For those whose goal is God realization, one needs to transcend both happiness and unhappiness. Could you please give some thoughts on that?
Yes. See, it's such a beautiful question. Material level happiness has to be transcended in order to realize Satchidananda, the very source of happiness. But that is the highest happiness. That's why the very description of God in our scriptures is Sat Chit Anand. He is of the nature of existence, consciousness, and bliss. Bliss is part and parcel of Him. So knowing Him gives you the greatest amount of bliss possible. But to experience that, you have to transcend this. I told you, you have to climb that ladder. You have to transcend this level of joy, which is only restricted to the senses. Because what happens is, just remaining at this level, the first rung of the ladder, will keep your senses engaged in outer objects. And they can give you only very limited amount of joy. This is the whole problem. So in order to overcome this, gradually you train yourself to climb the ladder. Ultimately, when you realize God, when you reach the highest level of knowledge, there you will see that these three, Sat, Chit and Ananda, are not three different things. They are not existences apart from consciousness, which is different from bliss. They are not three properties of an entity. This, just like how you see milk. Milk means, obviously it is a liquid. It is white in color, it is sweet. All these are together in milk. So also Sat, Chit, Ananda are together in the Supreme Godhead, in what you are calling Brahman, Atman. So they are just the realization of the highest level of awareness, pure consciousness. We bring all of this into our experience. And for that, this mundane level has to be transcended. Otherwise, the mind will remain engaged only with sense objects. This is the simple reason. I hope it is clear.
Mataji, there is a comment by Anita Manchanda ji. The assurance we get from the book is our liberation is inbuilt within us.
Yes, right. True. See, this is the bottom line, that you have been given an equipment which can take you to the highest level of bliss. Now, whether you utilize it or not, whether you understand the mechanics of it or not, it's up to you. Vedanta is nothing but the science of consciousness, and yoga is the technology of consciousness, which teaches you how to go to the highest rung of this ladder of happiness. If you bring it into your life, in a small way you can start. A little bit of meditation every day. And of course, some lifestyle changes are required, a sattvic kind of lifestyle. Then you can climb this ladder and reach the highest rung of happiness. Then that's when you realize that it is indeed inbuilt within us. The highest knowledge, liberation, whatever you call it, is inbuilt in this system. How I utilize this system is all that matters.
Thank you, Mataji. Rishidev Unni has a question. Adding on to the previous question, can there be transcendence without happiness? Is it necessary that we have to be happy for us to attain enlightenment?
No, is transcendence apart from happiness, he's asking. The first question, isn't it?
He's asking, can there be transcendence without happiness?
No, there cannot be, because the fact that you see, what do you transcend? Initially, you transcend the senses and the mind awakens. Then you transcend the mind and you awaken to self-knowledge. So every level of transcendence is giving you higher and higher degrees of happiness only. This is to be done, to be known. Yoga is a system given to us to scientifically discover these facts by ourselves. That's why it's a science and it's a technology. It is not a philosophy, it is not somebody's meditation. These are not a bunch of ideas. It is something to be done, to be known. If you employ a technique which will take you just from this sensory level to the level of highly deep level conscious mind activity. That is the first step in this technology. And then you transcend even that to awaken to higher awareness. And you understand throughout this process that it only yields higher and higher levels of joy. Only thing is that transcendence has to be made yogically and not merely through thinking and not merely through, it's not to be believed in or have faith in it and do it. You have to do it to know it. It's like that. So yoga is the path to this.
He has a second question, which is a related question. Is it necessary to have that we have to be happy for us to attain enlightenment?
Well, is it necessary for us to be happy? This book is only for those who want to be happy. This book is only for those who are really wanting to be happy from within. And that happiness is realized ultimately to be the highest level of conscious awareness. This, I'm telling you, these are not mere words. It is to be done, to be known, because as consciousness unfolds, you understand that there are higher and higher levels of happiness available to the human experience. So it is not that, well, you were very sad and then so you took up a spiritual practice to take you into that. No, you understand. Let us be mature enough to understand the nature of life, human life. Initially, it is all sensual. Initially, you are at that level where only sense objects give you happiness. But there will come a point in every life it comes. I always say, every life has a monastic dimension. There will come a point in our lives when we will be asking, what more? What more is there? That is when you start climbing this ladder of happiness. And ultimately you find as you proceed, even in this path, it's not really leaving out something, giving up something. It is only going to higher levels of joy. See, as a baby, you were very happy with cotton candy. That was all you required to be happy. As a teenager, will you be happy with just that? And as a young adult, what will be your aims further? Will you be just happy with a little music and no? As you grow older, you get a taste for higher and higher levels of happiness. And if you practice meditation, these yogic techniques, you become mature very fast because you taste some of the highest levels of happiness naturally in course of your sadhana. So then what will you opt for? Sri Ramakrishna used to give the very simple example. You see that one who has tasted sugar candy syrup will not ask for a mere treacle or mere something just like that. So the idea is you have to develop a taste for higher and higher levels of joy. And this is what the book is, a manual to train you to do that through specific techniques.
Srilekha Banerjee has a question. There is always a confusion in our mind about the state of happiness. How to make ourselves self-sufficient to be happy?
See, this confusion regarding happiness will remain in the mind as long as you remain in the mind. As long as the mind is not refined and transcended to a certain extent through the practice of yoga. I found this early in my life that without meditation, the mind works in very strange ways. It will try to maximize happiness remaining at one level only. And for that, it will keep gathering a whole lot of things, always trying to convince itself, well, that would give me a little more, that. So the whole of life is chasing objects. It becomes like that, naturally. Whether you want it or not, this will be the natural way the mind will proceed. So in order to overcome this problem, bringing a little bit of yoga into our life becomes absolutely necessary to lead a mature, enlightened life, which is seeking higher happiness. Otherwise, the same things in different ways, old wine in a new bottle. The pleasure is like that. The same thing will keep coming to you in different ways, in different guises, and until a point when you get frustrated of it. Any object of the sense is like that. After a certain point, it will create frustration in you. So then, has your mind a way to go beyond this? Have you discovered a way? Have you discovered a way to turn inward? Are you able to get joy by yourself? From yourself, without any object? Are you able to remain apart from objects and yet remain happy and balanced? All these questions you must put to yourself and find out if it's possible. This is the way we mature in life. Otherwise, constantly, you see, a mind which is only committed to sense pleasure, it is going to chase only that all through life. It will never climb this ladder and keep getting frustrated, anxious, anxiety, anger. All these cycles of thought have been given in this book. So please go through it and you will see that it will be useful practically to your everyday life and put in very simple language also.
Mr. Shudip Ghosh, could you please mute yourself? Mataji, so the crux is that basically happiness will happen only if we can do a little bit of mind management, and there can be no management of the mind without meditation. Now, this is the big question before us because we have an education system which tells us nothing, absolutely nothing about our true self, about self-knowledge, about how to, train the mind. It tells us absolutely nothing about these things. So since the formal education system doesn't tell us about these things, and we also cannot hear about these from our families and our parents, so how would you suggest for the larger youth to go about it?
Yes, so when you are not getting it through mainstream academia, it is important for you to try to go to, like, for example, there are forums like this. Your BSc itself is one such forum, which is discussing these ideas. I'm happy to tell you that a number of universities are starting science of happiness courses. And I am working with one university, SSU in Cuttack, which has already started a department of contemplative studies, and Science of Happiness is part of their course, both at UG and PG levels. And this is a textbook for them. So there are universities which have understood the importance. Once they actually, by seeing the IIT talks, many universities and at least 6 university deans and vice chancellors wrote to me.
So I think we are almost at the end, towards the end of the meeting, isn't it? I'll just complete what I was saying.
Yeah, there is only one more question, I think.
There's one question.
Yeah.
There's one question, Didi, from Aditi Mitra. How can students be happy? In present scenario of education sector, competitive exams, majority is taught to compare and people become unhappy when they don't reach their goal. How can they be happy when their goals are not met?
Yes. See, that is the thing. A whole lot of students asked for positive thinking courses from us. Because especially in this present scenario also, a lot of students are suffering from this kind of negativity, young people from loss of jobs. So when we don't meet our goals and there are obstacles on the way, how do we overcome them? For that, you have to put your 100% effort to meet your goal. But suppose it didn't work, it was not possible, then you must take recourse to positive thinking in your mind. This is a huge miracle which Vivekananda speaks of, the ability to continuously think positively when things are not going your way. Am I audible? Is it clear enough what I'm saying?
Yes, Didi.
Yes,
You are
Didi.
completely clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Hello, yes?
Yes, Didi, she is also asking about this competitiveness. I mean, competitiveness and happiness. Since people are busy comparing themselves and there's a lot of competition. So,
See, at that level, there will be competition, isn't it? Because a whole lot of students are doing the same thing. They are taking the same course. So there will be competition. There will be negativity. There can be very harsh sentiments. But that doesn't mean your level of happiness should go down. So a little bit of yoga in our everyday life will allow us to become happiness right from within ourselves, to become happiness due to the fact of our conscious awareness. So yoga teaches you to be happy by yourself and not due to something outside of you. That is why I always insist, especially for students, 5 to 10 minutes of meditation practice every day. If you can do, you will see your mind remains in a balanced state no matter what the outer circumstances are like. And there are a whole lot of people who have done this. If you read the life of Vivekananda, you will see that many negative situations he could face very positively and remain very calm for the simple reason the power of meditation is behind the man. So I would insist on this only. Whenever you encounter negativity or you are this over-competitiveness and such problems, please take recourse to meditation and positive thinking. These two should go hand in hand and the whole thing gets resolved. Please try it and see.
okay, thank you, Didi. I think we'll bring the discussion to a close with this. I thank all the 3 panelists and all our audience, all of you who have been present with us today. Thank you. I now hand over the mic to, yes, thank you, Gitanjali Di.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure joining this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hand over the mic to Alka to conclude the event with Shanti Mantra.
So before concluding, we are happy to announce that our next VSC talk is on 17th October, 5:30 p.m. Swami Sarvpriyananda ji will be speaking on consciousness, perspectives from science and Vedanta. So with this, I'll give the vote of thanks. So on behalf of VSC JNU, I extend my gratitude to our speakers, Mataji, Gitanjali Didi, and Prachi Didi, for for enlightening us and gracing us with wisdom and opinions today. We are deeply thankful to all of you for taking out the time to deliver the talk. I am thankful to the members of VSC JNU, Amrita Didi, Arun Sir, Anindita Didi, Sri Lekha Didi, Tanushri Didi, Shilpa Didi, and Prachi Didi for their constant inputs and suggestions at every step. I extend my special thanks to Swagata Di and Hridesh Sir, who took out their time in preparing flyer and taking hold of the technical part for the VSC JNU. I extend my special thanks to Arpita Didi for coordinating with the speakers and for her guidance from the beginning to the end of this program. Thank you, Didi. We are happy to have you as a leading member of the Vivekananda Study Circle. I would like to thank Professor Anirban Chakravarti, who has served as the foundation of the entire event. His calm approach and silent work is a great turner in turning this event to a success. And last but not the least, thank you everyone for joining the event and making it to a success. Now I'll conclude with the Shanti Mantra to this event. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukh Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you all of you.